It's too directional.
Okay.
All right.
This is commercial vendors, so it doesn't sound, so I better not, yeah. Okay, that's different. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good. You can leave it.
I understand time to break into the.
He's trying to tunnel under in, he's just trying to dig under there.
put a microphone in there.
I just think that's what happened. I think we just watched that.
Camera in there.
That just happened. I moved some of the junk out of the way there.
Okay, are we good?
Yep, welcome, welcome.
What is your personal preference on how the state school board should be chosen?
Do you want my personal preference, or would you like to know the pulse of the?
You first give me your personal preference, and then you can say anything you want.
Well, I'll tell you, my personal preference is this, unique to this year. We've had our process for selecting state school board candidates that are put on the ballot for voters' consideration has been struck down. And so there is no status quo that you can fall back on. In the past, we've had bills that have come considering a different way to do it, but where you couldn't find consensus, you always had this other scenario, this other process that would just stay as it is. We don't have that option, so coming up with something is just a necessity this time. For me, the frustration about the school board elections is the size of the jurisdiction, 190,000 constituents. And in my opinion, it's a very low information voting cycle. There's not a lot of campaign contributions that arrive for candidates, the ability to get messages out or priorities that someone would take with them if they were to represent that district on the state school board. You see very little of that in terms of a campaign effort. So I think you have to, if you're going to revamp this and you're going to look for a higher, more information or a high information voting cycle, you've got to look at a couple different scenarios. What's appealing for me, just speaking about for myself, about a partisan process is not the importance of the party name, Republican or Democrat. Now, we can't discount Republicans and Democrats because here in the Capitol and in the legislature, we are partisan and we grapple with education as our number one issue. So if we were to say there's a problem with that, it would almost be a self-indictment because we are of a party. But what I think is most important to consider when you think about a party, a partisan election cycle, is that when you go into the convention, the caucus convention cycle, you have delegates that are elected in every single voting precinct in that district. So there is a conduit of communication to literally a person in every single voting precinct of one of the largest political jurisdictions that we would seek to represent. That conduit of information, sharing of concerns and positions raises the bar and makes these elections more worthwhile. So it's the infrastructure that comes with a partisan election cycle that I think inherently makes it a higher information voting cycle. So I like that. There are other ideas on how to do that. One idea that I thought was intriguing was, what if school boards, elected school board members, came together in their respective larger state school board districts, and those school board members elected somebody to serve on that board? What if the governor, like the Board of Regents model, were to nominate and have the Senate vet those names for consideration and approval? Again, each of those models, I think, raises the bar in terms of information shared, positions on education, a vision of what public education should be doing or responding to. So I think all of those resonate. What I don't want to see, or what I would regret to see, is a very putting names on a ballot, seeing very low participation by campaigns or candidates in terms of the costs associated with running those kinds of races, and seeing things like the first name on the ballot having the statistical advantage in any race. That's not a very good way to elect your duly elected state school board, by a low information voting cycle where if you're the first name that the voter comes across as they're choosing, they go with that name because they wouldn't recognize it from any other name. And I don't think that's what you want. So if you're asking, Bob, that's the world as I see it.
We just got done meeting with the governor for his first availability of the session. A lot of the time was spent on Healthy Utah. A couple questions. Are we any closer to an agreement, and is there any shift toward the Healthy Utah plan?
Let me dodge that right over here. I have plenty of opinions, but we've been fortunate to have Representative Dunnigan, who has worked for years on this. He's chaired our task force on this issue, and so I just won't do it justice. Representative, you can answer that.
Thanks, Speaker. We are actively engaged and working on a solution to cover people in the coverage gap in Utah. And it seems like I talk to people from the governor's office almost daily. We are also engaged in working with the federal government to flesh out other options that could be available in the coverage gap arena. We are most concerned about the Utahns in the coverage gap. Above the coverage gap, above 100% of poverty, they are already eligible for subsidies. So Healthy Utah would cover those who are already covered and have them replace their coverage with Healthy Utah. We think that's unnecessary. That said, that's a requirement that the feds have placed on us to get the enhanced match. So there's a continuum from not doing anything now to doing Healthy Utah, and there's a lot of space in between. I think the House certainly is willing to find a spot in that space where we can work with the governor. And, you know, the governor would have to tell you if he thinks there's a spot to work there, to work with the House. I think he's indicated that there is, and we hope that there is.
But no
Would you
deal yet. No deal yet, or no.
No, there isn't a deal. This is a complicated project. As I said, we're actively engaged, working with the federal government on seeing what parameters we can use for legislative ideas, legislative solutions, and hopefully that will fit with what the governor wants to accomplish as well.
Would you say there's any shifting or softening to the governor's plan?
I think that we want to fill the coverage. We want to cover people in the coverage gap, and so we want it to be sustainable and affordable. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and so I think we're hopeful that the governor, between here and here, we can find some space in the middle that works for Utahns.
On non-discrimination and religious freedom, religious rights, where are you in discussions on that issue and that topic?
We're still in the discussion portion of that. There's not, I'm not aware of any bill that's imminent coming to the Rules Committee or or being sent to a standing committee. So we're still in discussions with the stakeholders in that effort.
Any bill coming anytime soon?
Soon, Ben, I don't know of any bill is coming soon. I do think at some point you will see, we already know there's efforts out there, but to maybe make it broad, maybe make it comprehensive, I don't know that that's in a place where it's ready to go live.
Are there some sort of self-imposed deadlines on some of these big issues where you want to have something, say, within a week? I mean,
if I do, I just break them. There's nothing if I tell you what date that will be the date it doesn't happen. I want you to know. So
we're 2 weeks in. I know there's approximately 4 weeks left. I mean, I know
thanks.
it's not winding down, but you know.
Maybe I'll mention about the joint caucus. Unless you
No, go ahead.
So back on the Medicaid expansion topic, we talked with our colleagues in the Senate, and we think it would be productive to have a joint caucus of the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans. And we hope to be able to put a schedule together and arrange that for sometime next week. And we'd utilize the brain power in the Senate and the House and come and lay out a variety of options, answer questions, educate ourselves and our colleagues, but in real time with our fellow senators and our representatives, and have a robust discussion about Medicaid expansion.
And that'll be open, right?
No, this is a roll your sleeves up, speak bluntly. We can't do this in a fish tank. This is already hard enough. We've got to be able to express maybe unfiltered concerns, questions, things like that. So, but I will say this, you don't see that happen. I've never participated in one like that. I think it points to how unique the situation is, where Congress passed a bill, the president signed it, the U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling that I believe changed the legislative intent of that bill and put a specific challenge or problem or decision point to state legislatures across the country. This is not what we do every year. This isn't what our legislature takes on by way of responsibility. It is a generational decision. It is a once. Yeah, I don't think you get a redo here. I know I've heard talk of pilots, statewide, to scale of the whole state pilot. Those I've seen pilots in legislation. They're usually small, and you get data from it, and you decide whether that pilot is something you could maybe then go to scale. So I don't know if that's even a pilot, but I'm not interested in piloting something across this entire state, providing to Utahns and then saying King's X, I guess it didn't work out, and pulling it back in a number of years. I think if we're going to do it, we better know what we're doing, and we better be prepared to keep those commitments that we make. That said, I think good information, good data will drive good decisions. And so unique to this process, we think that having both the House and the Senate members in the majority caucus doing a deep dive on the data and the information shared from different perspectives, but having that will drive a hearing at the same time and maybe seeing each other's or hearing each other's concerns across the board. It'll drive. I think that's where you see a gravitational pull, because this really cannot be a House versus Senate, a legislature versus governor political decision. It is one that is you got to get right. So I think we're willing to go to great measures to get good information in front of lawmakers so that we make the best decision.
Let's just do a couple more questions.
In caucus, I understand you discussed the number of bills that have been proposed. What were those numbers? And it sounds like it's a record breaker.
Yes, we are a record-setting caucus or legislature. It's not just caucus. It is not the Republican caucus that is setting records. It's the legislature in its entirety. We have around 1,100 bills that have been filed, and that's about 40 more than our previous high in 2008. One of the things that is also good to note that we have more bills numbered, completed, and ready for committee hearings by far than we had a year ago. And so our colleagues, I think, have heard our plea to get your legislation ready, get it out earlier in the session where it can be properly debated and vetted.
But with so many bills, is that too many? Are you even going to pass that many?
We won't pass that many, and that's a good thing. So
what happens is that when there's this crush of bills being considered at the end of the session, and I think that you get into this mindset as a lawmaker that you can really step it up towards the end and try to get your legislation passed. And in some cases, when you're looking at those last couple of days, the House and Senate suspend their rules in terms of having all the committee hearings because you're trying to get all your work done in such a short amount of time. What we've tried to communicate to House members, and I know the Senate's doing the same, is we're not interested in capping how many bills you can file. But if we do this process right, there's just going to be some natural constraints to how many bill files you can open, how much work you can take on during a general session, and maybe priorities of what lawmakers want to take on, how many bills they feel comfortable opening bill files for or trying to pursue that through our process. It's self-governing, because you're going to see if we hold true to a better process where we have both hearings in both the House and Senate, you have a rules committee that actually vets bills, looks at them, doesn't just kick them off. It's not supposed to be a springboard. There's actually a rules committee for a reason. They do if they're doing their work. All of those pieces, if they're done right, if you follow the rules, it's supposed to be hard to pass a bill. They're easy to kill a bill and hard to pass a bill. We want to make sure that's actually the case so that we're only letting the best ideas or best policy get through. So that's what we're after.
But is it too many? is it for, especially when you say we don't want too much government, it sure seems like you're proposing an awful lot of government.
Ben, that's why we become recommitted to the process, because we aren't going to tell individual lawmakers you can't file a bill. But is it too many? If you do the process right, I think at the end of this, there's gonna be a lot of bills that didn't pass. And I think that there'll be some good conclusions drawn from that experience.
I'd
Okay,
like to make a comment on that. We're doing something this session that, in my tenure, the speaker's tenure, I don't think we've ever done before that I recall. We're having standing committee hearings go into the last week of the session. So normally by that last week, all we're doing is just passing bills. A third of which have not had a standing committee in both the House and the Senate. So this year, our calendar, we have our draft calendar prepared. We have standing committees both the Monday and the Tuesday of the final week of the session. So to the speaker's point, this will be the sifting and the vetting process to approve those bills, kill those bills, perfect those bills before they ever get to the House or the Senate floor. And to their credit, the Senate, our Senate colleagues have agreed. So we're going to do that. That is a shift in process, which we hope will lead to a better outcome.
Okay, thanks guys.
Thanks.